Nope, nope, nope.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice for all.
for all. I don't have any agenda adjustments. Does anybody else have an agenda adjustment? This is intended to be a pretty focused meeting on COVID discussion. Seeing, oops, make sure I can see Aaron. Seeing no agenda adjustments, we'll go ahead and move forward. First up, we do have some minutes to approve. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from November 10th as presented. Is there a
I
second?
second.
Any discussion or corrections? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. We'll move on to the minutes of November 17th. I would make a motion to approve the minutes of November 17th as presented.
I
Is there a
second.
second? Any discussion or corrections? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. We don't have any warrants. We'll deal with those next week. We come to public comment. Just two quick background points about public comment. One is it is a comment period, not a question and answer. We just have finite time that the board can talk with each other. We have to do it at a public board meeting. So, oops, I don't have my video on. So you're welcome to ask a question, but don't be offended if we don't get back to you. Really, probably email or a phone call is the best way to ask a specific question. Only other comment I would make is you're welcome to discuss situations, but please do refrain from calling out individual employees or specific contexts. You're welcome to discuss, the generalities of what happens and how you felt about that and how specific situations or employees really should start with the principal. So with that, I'll throw the floor open to public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment? Patrick, it looks like you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if anyone else wanted to speak up first. I wanted to just kind of state that we've been at this for a long time as a community, and I really appreciate the work that everyone has been doing in the schools and with the board. I know that none of this is easy. over the Thanksgiving break, my wife and I were reflecting on our choice to send our child to school in person. And it really was the right choice. That's been very clear. And I've been swayed over the past several months about how critical it is to have in-person education. That being said, when we were talking about the protocols that have been set up, that was back in July and August and September. And it appears that we've done a fairly good job as a community, as a school community, of sticking to those protocols. But those were set up back in a time when the COVID rates in Maine were incredibly low, where we had basically no community transmission. And I remember discussions at the time where people said, you know, we're not New York City, we're not California, we're not some of these high case areas, and maybe things would be different if we were one of those places. That's us now. I was just looking at the Maine CDC website, and if you look at the spike in cases just in our county since November, you know, the daily new cases being reported, and especially if you look at the week before Thanksgiving, when I think a lot of people probably went and got tested before they traveled, that started to discover a lot of cases that were maybe hiding, and people weren't symptomatic, but they were still spreading the disease. I just wanted to point out that our current protocols don't stop someone who's infectious and not symptomatic from coming to school. And our current protocols don't stop kids from getting sick from each other. We had a recent experience in our family where there were some kids sick and then more kids sick in the same class. And it wasn't COVID, you know, thank goodness. But it shows me that while what we're doing may be slowing down the spread of disease, it's not foolproof. And if our priority is going to be education in a time when we see cases rising locally and in our state, I think we need to make use of every single tool we have to keep in-person education possible. And if that means not doing sports where it's a high-risk situation and focusing on getting kids exercise outside, spaced out, even with masks on. If that means if you've got the sniffles, you stay home until you've had a COVID test, rather than the pretty severe symptoms that are required under the current symptom screening tool. I think that those approaches should be considered even if they're not required by the state. And I think that our priority should be keeping in-person education going throughout the year if we can, but certainly for as long as possible, using every possible tool that we have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Lots to think about there. Anybody else? One last chance for public comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and go on. So as I said, this is a pared down meeting. It's not a typical meeting. It was an extra meeting called to deal with ongoing COVID issues. So we'll go ahead and jump to item 6A, COVID update and discussion, which Meredith will kick off.
So we last spoke 2 weeks ago before we had the school break. And since that time, 2 weeks has elapsed, and that gives us 2 weeks of data to look at. So in the board packet, and I emailed you today to just alert you that I'd asked Brian if he could give us an update of the data charts he's been providing to us. So you've been provided that. Also, I added the CDC, that same data chart that that we've been looking at all along. People are messaging me about the waiting room, so I don't have access to that tonight. So Rachel or Brian, I'm happy to do that if someone wants
I
to.
don't see anybody in the waiting room at the moment,
Okay.
so I'll try and keep an eye on it.
So just a summary of that data that obviously I think everyone's aware of, but I mean, one of the things that strikes me about the cumulative case count for the county by county data that the CDC puts out, we've moved up that list in in a bad way, obviously, to be, the third highest. But I think, it's the case rate that to me is pretty substantial, that it's increased by 26 since we last looked at this 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry. Case rate. It's the case rate. It's the cases per 10,000 people. So the the number of cases in 2 weeks went up 393, which is a very significant increase over the trend line that was happening. But what we see, and if you look at the charts that Brian provided, is over the last week it's pretty flat. That matches what I've seen in the reporting that came out Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There was certainly a slowdown, I think Friday and Saturday, of maybe even Sunday, of testing and reporting. So the data certainly, I think, is flattened, maybe in a way that doesn't reflect actual probably trend line, but about testing availability. Because you can also see the dip in the testing on Brian's chart. I noted that you see a little dip in the cases and also a dip in the testing over that same time period. So I think there's a direct correlation there. So, sorry, someone's looking for the passcode, Rachel, on Facebook, if you could look at that message. So when you look at, what's happening around us, certainly have probably the most anticipation I've had so far about the color designations that are due out Friday. I haven't felt really up to this point that we were, it may be one other time that I wondered if we might change to yellow, and I guess I have greater concern that that might be coming our way. But Friday is the next school health advisory rating. They did not do one last week. So with that coming out Friday, I expect to see some changes happening around the state with that. And so, with that, at our last meeting, we talked about our yellow plan. There was some good questions about that. And Mark asked me a question that I followed up on with the state. And the question was, when other districts have gone yellow, have districts done, a combination of some in-person, full in-person, some hybrid, kind of like what we had in place, our half yellow, half green plan we have in place now? And the answer was yes, that it depends completely on a district's ability to, with spacing and their, classroom capacities to be able to make that decision. So as, we talked a bit about this, I've really come around to feel like for the grade levels where we're remaining at 6 feet spacing, and that's in our K2 rooms, our pre-K2 rooms, that I feel like when we're yellow, there's a decision still to be made, and it might be depending on, factors that aren't maybe this quantitative set of data. It might be, initially, I'm not sure I would change those grades because they can maintain that 6 foot distancing. So that's really where, when I talked with Kristen and the admin team about that, I think everyone felt like that made sense. I think, thinking about how hybrid could look for those grades, certainly there's some trade-offs in doing it the way we presented, but you don't get that classroom teacher ratio down. But certainly instructionally, it makes sense for those students to be, for hybrid to be designed that way. But I just think that in yellow with K2, we have some decisions that we'll need to make if we go yellow about those. And I'm not sure that I'm feeling like those grades would go early. So I just wanted to update you on kind of the thinking and discussing we've been doing based on, asking more questions of the Department of Ed and really assessing, those grade levels in terms of the spacing and the student teacher ratios we're able to maintain in those grades.
I appreciate you continuing to kind of think out of the box and checking around and doing that additional work on that. And I think I do like that direction personally. So I do appreciate that. And I just don't, like we all talked about, I don't see the gains to going yellow. So I'm glad that we're still thinking about it. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole process is continually, we have to continually examine what we're doing and what we're learning about the situation. So, I certainly don't think that we have all the answers to know. And I think our goal of communicating our thinking out there so people can begin to prepare and understand what it might look like. But I don't think there are ever any absolutes in the situation that we're in, that really it's going to continue to be evaluated and learn from what other places are doing that have been through this kind of surge that, is happening in places now. The other thing that we've been working on is really thinking about that equity concern that Mark's brought up a couple of times, and considering how that might be addressed if we continue in a model like we're in now long term. So that's something that we really wanted, though, to have some time to work with staff on, and have staff really think through and help us consider options for that. And we'll bring you some more information on that. We hope to have some initial thinking by the next board meeting, but certainly not a definitive plan, but some initial thinking by then. Any other questions or feedback about any of this, or any other questions on the model or data?
I would just say that I agree that I support the looking at the K2. We are getting 6 feet spacing there, and the educational need is just really compelling. I know I may be alone on the board, but I would also advocate that we need to think about out of the box in both directions. And I think that the high school, things push in the other direction. We're down to 4.5 feet in a number of classrooms. We don't have good potting. Teachers and students are mixing all the time. We have the hallway congestion, and the evidence is growing that, somewhere between middle school and college, people from the point of view of COVID turn into adults, and the risk of spread goes up, and the risk of getting sick goes up. The consequences of getting sick, while still pretty low for that age group, does go up as well. So I think we need to be thinking creatively at both ends of the spectrum, and really, I think the winning path for the next 6 months is going to be to think creatively and out of the box, and not just have a cookie cutter. We've done that really well so far, but I think we need to think about whether the high school, just as K2 might stay full on during yellow, I think we need to think about what's the right approach for the high school as we hit yellow and start to shift into red. If we start to shift into red, that's not a very popular view, but I think there's some pretty good data medically and educationally. Not to say that it's not a deficit to go to remote at a high school level. It certainly is, but the deficit is a lot smaller, in my opinion, than it is for a K2. And I think the medical risks are higher, partly because of the situation we are able to set up. We're not able to get 6 feet in good potting, and partly just because of the age of the group. So I would encourage us to continue to think about that out of block on that end as well. And I think really looking at the data this week, it's really chopped up. They released no tests on Thursday and almost no tests on Friday, and Saturday and Sunday have historically been very low. They kind of trickle out of the lab on Saturday and Sunday. They were pretty high. It's very hard there's no transparency about whether those Saturday, Sunday numbers were catching up for the Thursday, Friday, or if we're still behind, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very hard for me to read the data this week and say we're going up or say we're going down. We're still clearly close to where we were a week or two ago, and not where we were a month or two ago, which is unfortunate. But I really think this week is probably mostly a keep talking, keep thinking, keep strategizing week, and kind of a hold steady as we go with the school's situation. So that reflects what I'm hearing, and I agree with that. But I would push us to think a little bit about the high school as well.
I guess I'd agree with all of the points made in this discussion thus far. I do think trying to make sense of anything on the data coming out of the state before Thursday or Friday of this week would probably be a waste of time, just because there's very little I think we can tell out of what we've seen yesterday, today, probably still tomorrow. Maybe by Thursday or Friday we'll start to get an idea, because I would assume that we looked at the data that we released today. New cases were about the same as they've been recently, but the number of deaths had shot up dramatically. I'm assuming that was playing catch up from, not just one day, but multiple days. But hopefully by Thursday or Friday, we'll have a better idea of where we are. I do think that, I was just reading some of these studies today, that the data are increasingly clear that at the elementary level and even at the middle school level, although it's a little bit less clear there, the elementary school level, age level, it's almost crystal clear at this point that the risk of contracting COVID and transmitting COVID for whatever reason, I don't think anybody understands the reason yet, but the risks are much lower there, and to the point where it's increasingly a number of U.S. municipalities and districts are adopting the model that Europe has really approached all along, which is, kind of prioritizing schools over other things, which we're still unfortunately not necessarily doing in the US, but in particular, kind of running their youngest students, and in some cases even their middle-aged students, full-time in person. I think that's pretty compelling for us to look at and consider maybe following suit if the numbers allow. High school, I do agree with Brian, increasingly is a different story, and it's compounded by the other problems which he mentioned, the fact that we don't have clear just grade levels of students going. They cross grade levels to go to classes, teachers cross grade levels. There's a whole bunch of different concerns at the high school, and because of that, I really do sympathize with Reg and Sam and his team up at the high school for trying to come up with an equity plan, even just because it's so much more complicated, I think, than it is at ASA or at the middle school. But what I guess I'd most agree with Brian on is at this point we're kind of wait and see, and see what the numbers tell us at the end of this week and see what they tell us next week. And by the end of next week, we would start to get into any kind of post-Thanksgiving surge. If it's coming, we'd start to see at least the front edge of that. So I think we kind of wait and see and keep our fingers crossed and hope that we can stay green, obviously. And then if the state changes their mind on that, we'd have to talk that out if and when that time comes. So that's, I guess, where I am on it. And then Meredith, I did just have one question. Could you remind me when the third quarter starts? It's early January, is that correct?
It's late January. Is it the 25th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm all set.
Rachel, I think people were wanting access to that COVID numbers document that we were talking about. I don't seem to have the power to share that, but if you can share that, that would be great.
I'm working on it. It's a little bit complicated,
Okay.
but it's almost there. So one more minute.
Thank you so much. Just to let people know it's coming.
I guess the only thing I'll once again add, because I think I'm adding in every meeting, is that I appreciate being flexible at the high school level as well, but I think we have to keep in mind it is obviously not a zero-sum game. So when we go full remote, other things can and will happen that will be a result of kids not being together, not being in school. And I think their schedule changes when they're remote, at least to some degree also. But it's also, not also, but the mental health piece that I feel like for younger kids, I agree with everything. I agree with the method we're doing and considering. But I also think for young kids as a parent, you control their universe pretty easily. So you can, you can do things differently than when you have a teenager or a young adult, basically, which is what obviously high schoolers are getting to. That's the whole point you're making with their ability to catch the disease and to transfer it. But you control that environment, and I don't feel like for the younger kids. Well, I mean, I guess I do still feel like having them masked all day and not seeing facial. I think there's impact there, but I don't think it's the same as a young adult that is being secluded and not seeing friends and locked away. So I just think we need to continue to be cognizant of the fact that there are unintended consequences to full remote, and we have to keep that in mind when we're getting creative. So that's all I'll say.
I will say from a perspective of what we just learned this week when we did contact tracing, that hybrid makes a difference. It makes a big difference in exposure, even with class changes. I mean, it significantly reduces the number of kids in class each day. And, it's not insignificant, certainly, but at the high school anyway, it just depends on other factors. There's a chance we can continue on with school. There's a chance. It just depends on staffing. Middle school's another story, but hybrid makes a really big difference in footprint. And, I think that what I can also say though is when Mark was talking about, mixed classes, when I look at the data set of contact tracing that we had to do, it was every single grade impacted because classes are not pure all day long. There certainly are some classes that are pure grade level specific, but it's rare that a child goes through a whole day. I don't think any child goes through a whole day in the high school and doesn't have mixed grade classes at some point in their day. So it's just the reality of how high school works. Any other questions, feedback, comments from the board?
I guess I'd just make a general comment for people that I've been having this conversation with several people, but this district is a very information hungry district. We're used to having lots of information about what's going on, and COVID in general is not a very information friendly disease. The symptoms 90% overlap with the flu, the cold, the allergies. So it's not at all obvious to somebody whether, you don't have to be irresponsible to think you don't have COVID. And then, down the road, you do go get a test, and it takes 2 to 5 days is normally what they say. But as far as I can tell, it might be closer to 6 or 7 right now as the testing shoots through the roof. And so there's another 7 days you're waiting. And so, and that interacts with the fact that we have strong privacy laws in this country. We have HIPAA, and the public health laws that require reporting of diseases also require privacy around those diseases. So I think people have been pretty good and pretty understanding, but it's probably just worth reiterating. Everybody's going to want more information as we get into situations over the next 6 months. Everybody's going to want more information than we can obtain, just because of COVID being complicated, right? It's got lag times and lots of asymptomatic people, and it's just a messy disease to track. It's not like SARS or MERS where the day after you get it, you're in the hospital. It's just a very messy thing to track. And then even when you get into having a test and a positive result, there's a lot of privacy concerns. And I think as a parent, I get the wanting to have every last detail about every single case in the schools, but that's just not the way our society and our privacy laws are constructed. So I appreciate everybody being supportive and understanding that context, but I think it's an important context to remind people of going forward. Anything else?
Shall we shift to the winter sports discussion?
Yep.
Do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start us off. So we do have it showing up in discussion items, but I think action items, but I think when Meredith and I were talking about it, we've realized that, every consequential decision we've taken, we've tried to stretch it over 2 board meetings so people can have an awareness we're talking about things, and so that there's a chance for public comment and staff comment and for us to reflect and listen and all those kinds of things. And there is no specific urgency around winter sports. Monday before next board meeting, they're allowed to start physical conditioning, but even under the current plan, there's no team-based practices until after the next board meeting. So I think the thought was to just have the discussion tonight, and then at the next board meeting. I think some of the details are still being fleshed out, so that buys us time to wait for a decision too. So my recommendation would be to not address it as an action item tonight, address it as a discussion, and then we'll address it as an action item next week, which would be consistent with past practice and still give us full time to proceed in all different directions from that. You guys have in the board packet the update from the return to competitive athletics. It's the same basic rubric that we've seen. Things are rated by risk level, and then depending on risk level, there's levels of activity allowed. Lowest levels of activity just being by yourself at home, moving up through, let's see, what level 2 is team-based practice with physical distancing. Level 3 is intra-squad scrimmages within team competition. Level 4 is competition between teams at other schools nearby. And then it goes all the way up to level 6, which is like national competition. Of note for, I'm just going through the current document, not expressing opinions, but just trying to summarize the current document. Sports that are considered low risk include some of our track throwing events, and outdoor cross-country skiing events. Yeah, I think I've caught the list there, and individual swimming events. Examples that are moderate risk would include basketball, team cheering competition. I think those are the ones that, and ice hockey. We do not have wrestling, which would be the winter high-risk event. The current recommendation is that the low-risk events, which would be basically throwing and indoor track throwing and individual swimming and Nordic skiing, can go up to level 5, which is actually competition across the state of Maine. And at the medium-risk events, which would include basketball, cheering, and hockey, can start level 1, phase in levels 2 and 3 by December 14th, and level 4, which is local competition, by January 11th. All of these include some modifications. They also all are subject to the governor's mandate and the DOE mandate around masks. So those moderate risk sports that are indoors, the cheering, the hockey, and the basketball, would entail masks as well as other possible modifications to the sport. So that's the current recommendation. Unlike the fall, the state and the MPA have kind of, the Maine Principals Association have kind of gotten their act together and talked to each other before putting this out. So that's my understanding that this is the current joint recommendation. Like I say, I think we should take a vote on the record, but we should do it next week about whether we endorse this or endorse something differently. But I think it would be good to start the conversation right now. I'm mostly okay with this. I find some of the indoor sports being a team-based competition, it's definitely pushing my comfort level, even wearing masks. I just don't know if you play basketball or hockey, can you keep a mask, which it's pretty clear that once they get wet, they're not effective. I also think, intra-squad scrimmages, I get it, that's not as exciting as a team competition, but if the arguments are about mental health, social interactions, and physical health, with those indoor activities being at the intra-squad level than at the intra-region level. But I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on that, but I'm just highlighting that as a concern of mine. And hockey, I have a particular concern about because there have been a number of outbreaks already in high school hockey as well as college hockey. We don't quite understand why, but cold environments seem to be a bad place to prevent COVID transmission. meat packing plants are another example, but there have been quite a few high school hockey outbreaks already, as well as college hockey outbreaks. So I guess I highlight that as a special concern. I have it about basketball and cheering too, but I especially have it about hockey. On the other hand, I'd note that hockey is a joint program with Old Town, so anything we do is going to have to be in coordination with Old Town on that. So those are my quick thoughts on sports. I do think, as the numbers go up, the choice between, I've said we need to close bars and do some other things to help keep the schools open. Sports is, a higher priority on my list than keeping the bars open or indoor restaurants open. Again, not that I wish any owners bad. I totally support the government keeping those people whole. But in terms of meeting societal goals, to me, sports just does come a little bit lower than keeping the schools open too. And as the numbers if the numbers continue to go up, we have to start asking that question. We're not there today either, but that's weighing on my thoughts too. So I'll stop there and open it up to the diversity of opinions that I'm sure are about to come.
I'll just add a couple of things. Mike, Archer, Steve, Van Dolman, Reg and Richard, myself, we've been in conversation about this. And, I think as a group, and I'll say this with a caveat, if anyone feels I'm misrepresenting, please jump in. Feel like the state guidelines that have been really, I think, developed in a more collaborative manner with lots of agencies working through them with the MPA, giving us kind of a step-by-step approach to how to go about doing this, coupled with the fact that after doing fall sports, we feel like we have some protocols that we've learned from and can build upon. Feel like if the state's saying that this is an acceptable way to operate winter sports, as long as you're under green, which is the other caveat, I think we're generally supporting the framework as it's been presented. The other thing that we've talked about is particularly with hockey and swimming, that we have cooperative teams with Old Town, that we really have to work with Old Town to determine additional procedures that we can put in place to just help prevent cross Old Town High School, Orono High School, additional kind of footprint. There are some ideas that we can consider with that. Old Town's interested in doing the same, having those same discussions. It's really a priority that in talking with David Walker, the Old Town superintendent, he and I both share in order to, have those cooperative sports occur in a safe way for both of our schools and districts. But those are things we think we can solve. They're going to take a little more time to solve than where we are right now, which I think is another good reason to kind of have some discussion tonight. And then we will likely have some more information on that front at the next meeting as well. I asked Mike and Steve to come tonight to be able to answer any questions that you may have about some of the details, or there are some differences outlined if you've gone through this document, just some game changes to promote more distancing and not have people in close proximity in some of the traditional ways that some of the games are played. So they can answer any questions you might have. So, Board or Mike, Steve, Richard, Reg.
Meredith, I'll just take a moment just to let everybody know that Amy and I have spent a good chunk of time over the last couple of weeks developing protocols that fit our facility, that are consistent with what CDC and the Sports Medicine Committee would like to see happen for indoor sports. We've purchased enough masks, for both our middle school and high school athletes to have a couple each. I think we all felt that if these were going to be mandated to be worn inside, that that we would provide some assistance and help some kids with that, because they're going to need multiple masks over the course of a basketball game or a hockey game. They're probably going to need, depending on the player, but if it's a player that plays quite a bit or the whole game, they're going to probably go through, anywhere between 3 and 4 masks, in a game. So we thought that would be a good thing for us to help with. So those are on order. Right now, if we get the right designation on Friday, and if that's green, then we plan on following the guidelines that the MPA have set out and starting on Monday the 7th in the sports of basketball, cheering, and Nordic skiing. Right now, our co-op teams are undecided at this time. At the starting time, we're waiting to hear some guidance from Old Town and what their decision is going to be, and we will wait until we hear that before we make any decisions. We've decided that because of the lack of facilities and the period of time in which they're not going to be available to us, that we're going to hold off on starting indoor track in person until a later date. However, Coach Libby and I talked today, and he has every right to be able to reach out to those kids and offer individual workouts so that they can be ready. But looking down the road and knowing that we're not going to have any facilities on college campuses for indoor track until probably at least as early as March, from what we're being told, we just felt that it wasn't the right time to start right now. That's an awfully long time to train with no traditional meets on the horizon. And we also encourage kids, and I commend Chris for having this attitude about this, but we also encourage kids, if they had any doubt that whether there was going to be a season or not, that to certainly look to some other sports and get involved. And I appreciate him, thinking outside the box like that, because he could be losing some athletes, but I think his mentality is he wants the kids to be active. So we may have that take place. And then January 11th is the date that we can start unified basketball. I do have some concerns about that time frame and when we're starting. And my concerns lie around some of our athletes in terms of high risk and how their families may feel about that. So I think at the league level, we're going to have a discussion about that on Thursday to see be a better pocket of time later on in the year of 2021 to offer unified basketball that would open up more opportunities for our unified athletes. So, other than that, that's where we are. We're just kind of in a holding pattern. We're ready to go on the 7th. We hope we have that opportunity, but we'll have to wait and see on Friday.
And I just want to add to what Mike was saying, that we are both going to have our parent meetings on Thursday. The middle school at 6, the high school at 6:30, where we'll sort of go over, the exact details of our safety plans for each sport.
Just weigh in, I think, quickly that I'm generally supportive of following the MPA's guidance for all the reasons, I guess, Meredith, that you just mentioned. I am curious, thoughts maybe for anybody, but I'm thinking I'll direct it at Mr. Archer. I'm wondering why the timeline on waiting? What do we gain from that? The only thing I could possibly think of is maybe starting things after the holiday helps us get through the holiday or something. I don't know. We just played a whole fall season, so I'm not sure what we gain by waiting at this stage.
Waiting on, you mean his reference to indoor track?
No, that's, I understand that one. Actually, that's aside from track, why, well, I guess the 7th we start, why wouldn't we just start normally at the
phase in of the levels?
Yeah.
Yeah. Personally, I agree with you. I don't think this year has shown that waiting is the good strategy.
Yeah.
But it is the MPA guidelines, so I don't know how we go rogue by ourselves, but I don't see the benefit either.
Reg might be able to weigh in a little bit on this because he's on the actual sports medicine committee. but I think they're trying to follow the template of how we phased into our fall sports. And that would be consistent with the way that we did that, starting with some conditioning. And although, albeit we did it in the summertime, but this is kind of, the way that we progressed and went into, the fall sports season. So again, I don't know if Reg has anything to add with that in terms of the sports medicine committee or not.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think there was any science behind it other than on one end, everything was delayed. The working together with the state agencies, the DOE and the DHHS around, and the MPA to develop the guidelines. That took time. Get into the holidays. There was concern about, a surge after the holidays. So, but some of it was just basic. The time it took to get guidelines together and approved and put them out got us to where we are now. And so I'd say that was the biggest thing.
I do think also, I remember listening to, I can't remember if it was a DHHS meeting or an MPA meeting, but it was one of the meetings where these guidelines are being discussed. And there was some mention of waiting to start competition between schools until after the kind of Christmas holiday break had ended and there had been enough period of time. I don't think that was the only reason, but I think that was part of it. So.
And then just one more, I guess, point or ask. Maybe it's for the board. I'm not sure who it's for, but Mike talked about, and I appreciate that. Chris Libby is saying, if we may not have a season, look at other options to get people out there. On that note, I would like to get people's thoughts on ensuring that we have an outdoor ice rink and we know outdoor sports work. I'm a little nervous that it's not going to get opened up. And I think that's a great opportunity for not just hockey players, maybe more kids that want to skate. And, I think we use it for PE and whatnot as well. So I don't know if it's, I know the town manages that rink. And maybe it's a formal ask from the board or from Meredith to connect if we all agree that is a good option for when because outdoor worked for us. We do know that, and it's different times and there are more cases and all of that. So I'll acknowledge that, but that is outdoors. And I think, we're planning on a big Nordic team probably because that should continue to go. I think we should be taking full advantage of that facility that we have and making sure that we're all on the same page, that we want it up and running and allowing outdoor exercise. I don't know what people's thoughts are. Maybe that's to the board, I guess. Get people's thoughts on that.
I certainly support the outdoor rink. Like you say, I don't know what our role is in it. And I worry a little bit that the forecast for this year is going to be bouncing up and down across the freeze line. So maybe a hard rink to maintain this year, but I certainly support, having that open and available.
Yeah, we don't have any role with that. And I'll have to check because I know there was some conversation about whether they were going to actually freeze the rink this year. I don't know the right word for it, sorry. But I'd have to check and see what their plans are based on something that's in the back of my mind that I vaguely remember a conversation about. So that's the town's property.
I know that it is the town's and it's maintained by the town, and it had been maintained. It's been maintained by volunteers for a long time as well until the last couple of years. But that's what I'm looking for, I guess, is sort of a formal, we as the school want that facility. It doesn't mean we get it, but just to send the message that we believe there's value in having it, and we'd like to talk or figure out how we can help with that.
I'd certainly be supportive of whether it's a formal board request or whether it comes from Meredith, whichever, or both. If we want to do both, I'm fully supportive of that. And if there was a possibility that it might need some resources if we had some available, and especially if we could use it for PE and stuff, I'd be open for that too. But I think Meredith's right. I think I remember hearing somewhere too that there was a plan not to have that facility go. So if there's a, I'm supportive of what you're asking for, whether it's from the board or from Meredith or from both.
Yeah, our PE program does use the rink when, weather permits, for sure.
Yeah, I thought they did.
I mean, I guess my first thought is that we could take a sense of the board resolution. It wouldn't be binding, obviously. We could take a sense of the board resolution. On the other hand, that's not been a common means of communicating back and forth. I think the last time we did that as a school board was on marijuana about 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't recall the town council receiving that particularly well. So my suggestion is that it's probably more effective to go to a superintendent, town manager conversation than a board resolution.
That sounds all right.
Yeah, that's fine with me as well.
With the full understanding that I know they maintain it. So it's just an ask, and our intent, I think, is the main thing. And if it helps, it helps.
I guess I'll weigh in at this point for my thoughts on winter sports in general. I think the process for getting these guidelines put together was, as Meredith alluded to, much more collaborative this time. I think the MPA kind of learned some lessons from the fall, and it seems like everybody was working together at the MPA, Maine School Board Association, Department of Health and Human Services, the DOE, and these guidelines, to me, it seems like all relevant parties have bought in and had their seat at the table in issuing these. I also appreciate that they have made the school sports guidelines and the youth community sports guidelines much more compatible. They were not over the summer, and they were not in the fall. They are now. I'm fully supportive of moving forward with our winter sports programs under the guidelines that the state and the MPA have put out. I'd also be supportive of voting in that fashion tonight. It was on the agenda as an action item, and it's been on there since the agenda was released. So I'm fully supportive of holding that vote tonight. That being said, if the rest of the board wants to hold it over for a week, given the fact that we are meeting next Tuesday, and that would only really delay the start of essentially skills and drills by one day, I'm okay with that too. I do think that if we weren't intending to vote tonight, that we probably should have adjusted the agenda accordingly. But if the rest of the board wants to hold off on that tonight, I'm fine with it. But I'm fully supportive of moving forward under these guidelines, and if we vote tonight, I'm going to vote yes. If we vote next Tuesday, I'm going to vote yes. Either way, that's my stance on this. I think sports are an incredibly important extension, and not even an extension, important element of the school day. And the loss of those for our students in some cases can be pretty concerning. So I think the state's done a good job of ensuring that the activities can stay safe. And so I am fully supportive of moving forward under these guidelines.
Good question. So if we waited, it will delay the start of the skills and drills. Is that right?
The
Yes.
skills and drills for some teams are slated to start the 7th. Mike, I think, alluded to some teams aren't starting the 7th just because of schedules and availability. I think at the high school, it was basketball, Mike?
Basketball, cheering, and Nordic skiing.
I thought the Nordic wasn't starting until a week later.
Nope, they've decided
They
that they're
made
going to go 7th. Yeah.
Okay. And
Okay.
sorry.
I was going to say, Mike and Mike, just to be clear, so if we don't vote on this tonight and we wait till next Tuesday, we're going to hold up those 3 sports as far as starting their skills and drills on Monday.
Monday and Tuesday.
Monday,
Right.
Tuesday.
I mean,
Monday and Tuesday.
we could just vote to let the skills and drills start too, so that doesn't slow anything down, and then vote on the rest of the.
I'm not opposed to voting on it as we have it on the agenda either, just for the record.
Either am I, for the record.
I would probably prefer that.
I feel like we could vote tonight.
Okay. I'm the one who doesn't want to vote, so I'm not going to make the motion, but the floor is open for a motion.
I move that we approve winter sports in RSU 26 as suggested and following the state guidelines from DHHS and the MPA. Will that work, Meredith?
I would just
Yeah.
say,
Well, I was just going to say, the only caveat is with cooperative sports, there's a little bit of an additional nuance if the Old Town, district, school board, or she decided to take a slightly different approach, that we're really in cooperative they're the lead school in the cooperative. So that's the only little nuance, but we can still do this, but in the end, those two sports really fall to Old Town to make a final decision on.
how about this as a motion to proceed with sports as recommended under return to competitive athletics guidelines, with the caveat that the Old Town sports will require additional conversation with Old Town.
That works for me.
That's Mark's motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion?
So I just want to, I didn't get out there during the discussion when we were.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I'm definitely more comfortable with these guidelines than what they provided in the fall, which I thought were just super shoddy and not really doing it. But I am going to say that I do feel more comfortable with level 1 through 3 than I do with 4 through 6. I feel like we could get the same feel of sports. We can get the kids active and doing things without necessarily competing with other schools. So I'm just going to throw that out there as, I feel like definitely staying in school and trying to keep as many kids in school is more important than competing with other schools in sports.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion, which is to proceed with sports per the guidelines presented, and except that sports with Old Town, i.e. swimming and hockey, will be pending conversations with Old Town. Aaron, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I'm going to vote aye as well. So the motion passes. Looks like we have a path to go forward, obviously conditional on changing conditions, but all right, I think that covers the sports topic. We have the other action item is the co-curricular nominations. I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curricular nominations as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
And just to read them, these are at the middle school, some of them pending our vote last time to add an assistant position to middle school Nordic. So, but this is not creating positions at this point. This is just filling positions for the year. Robert Bass for middle school Nordic ski, Jennifer Branchflower for middle school Nordic skiing assistant, and Dave Hamill for middle school boys A's basketball. Any discussion or questions? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, any requests for other business from the board? Any requests for future agenda items?
I just want to say I'm looking forward to our next board meeting when we get kind of the first look at the plans to address the equity concerns. I do again think it's important. It's really important that we do whatever we can to get some full-time in-person opportunity for those students who have yet to had that this year, which is 4th and 5th grade at ASA, 8th grade at OMS, and then I believe 9th, 10th, and 11th at the high school. I also recognize, again, as I said earlier, high school is a different kettle of fish than ASA and OMS. But I look forward to getting that and hope that we have the opportunity to actually carry through with it. So.
Any other future agenda item requests? All right, we have a second public comment period. Would anybody like to make a comment? Last chance for any public comment. It's been a very quiet night tonight. That's all right. We do like to hear comments, but sometimes a short board meeting is good as well. Okay. All right, we'll go on to our next board meeting. Will be a week from tonight at 6 p.m. on Zoom. And agenda will be out for that, I think, shortly if it hasn't already gone out. Any requests for information or follow-up?
I got one request, just in addition to hearing what the Old Town board decides to do, or RSU 34 decides to do regarding the cooperative sports, also maybe if Mike could give us an update on the availability of facilities that we don't, have under our own use. So, for hockey and for swimming and indoor track, although he kind of informed us on indoor track already tonight, but in terms of, hockey and swimming, what that's going to look like, since we don't have the facilities for either of those.
Mark, do you want me to answer that right now?
If you can, that would be great. It's fine with me.
So the University of Maine has indicated that all of their facilities, not just indoor track, are they are not going to be renting any of their facilities for indefinitely. So we are fully planned and reached out to Sawyer Arena in Bangor for ice availability, and they were very receptive to that. So we have established the morning time slot for Sawyer Arena. Under the MPA guidelines, it only allows us to practice 3 hours a week. So we're meeting with the coaches tomorrow evening, the hockey coaches, to establish what that may look like, whether it is 3 1-hour sessions or 2 1.5-hour sessions. We've got solid numbers in hockey, so we're going to have to, really think about how we want to divvy that up and make sure that we take good care of the younger kids in our hockey program too, and give them a good experience. And that's where we'll be playing our games as well. I know that the Old Town superintendent has some concerns in regards to our students transporting themselves to hockey practice at 4:30 in the morning all the way over to Bangor. So I think that we will probably explore options in terms of transporting in the morning to see what SEER could do for us to help us in that matter. It's just a safety thing, and I think we had those same questions when it came time for the fall. So I think that's pretty consistent with the way we handled things in the fall. And I think it's a legitimate concern, that early in the morning with young kids driving. And then in terms of swim, Old Town owns their own pool. So if we go as they go, so if they decide to start at a later start, then that's what we will do that's what we'll do right along with them.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Actually, as long as we're on that topic, I had one more follow-up question, Mike, too, about audience for winter sports. I haven't noticed in the guidelines. Is that the same as the fall, or are there different, since it's indoors, are there differences?
Excuse me, what was the first part of the question, Brian?
The audiences, parents mostly, but in general, audiences of games.
No spectators.
Okay.
So next, the Wednesday, the 16th, we will have our Pixelot camera installed into the high school gym, and that'll be a roughly all-day event for them to be able to do that. But we felt Wednesday was the best opportunity to do that with nobody in the building, and they would have the complete gym to themselves to be able to work as long as they needed. They said it's going to take anywhere between 4 and 8 hours, so depending on what they run into and whatnot. But that will be much like WHOU for our fan base. It's $10.99 a month, or you could buy a subscription for the year for $70. But it would be better for basketball parents to just do the $10.99 a month, and it would be 2 months of purchasing, and that would cover both our JV and varsity games would be streamed in their entirety.
Thank you. Any other requests for information or follow-up? All right. I would make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Thank you, everybody. These 1-hour meetings are super. Well, they are easier to be short when we meet almost every week, so. Yeah, you could have that conversation.